My daughter-in-law looked me in the eye and said, "Pack your things." So I did. But she forgot one important detail. The house was mine. The furniture was mine. And the life she tried to steal from me was never hers to control. The house keys trembled in my hand, but my voice stayed calm. Chloe stood in front of me with a proud smirk, explaining why the master bedroom would be better as her new home office. I only nodded, because arguing would have warned her too early. Empty houses tell no lies. My name is Clara, and I am 65 years old. 3 years ago, my husband passed away, quietly in his sleep. Shortly after, my son Mark and his wife Chloe asked to move into my home to save money. I agreed, hoping to help them build a solid foundation. But gratitude quickly turned into a strange sense of entitlement. Chloe started acting like the lady of the house, while Mark simply faded into the background. The shift was subtle at first. She reorganized the kitchen cabinets, moving my favorite coffee mugs out of reach. She changed the living room layout without ever asking for my opinion. I said nothing, but I noticed everything. When Chloe handed me the ultimatum this morning, things changed permanently. She claimed they needed the master bedroom for a home office. She suggested I move into the damp, unfinished basement downstairs. I realized my hospitality had expired. She actually believed she held the real power in this relationship. She assumed that because I was quiet, I was fundamentally weak. She thought the house would automatically fall into their young laps. She was entirely wrong. Instead of arguing, I simply turned around and walked to my room. I pulled out a small notebook from my solid oak desk. I did not need to raise my voice. I only needed a plan. As I picked up an empty box, I heard Chloe laughing. She was completely unaware of what was actually coming her way. My quiet packing had officially begun. The next morning, Chloe left a long grocery list on the kitchen counter. She expected me to buy the food, cook it, and clean the dishes. I looked at the list, folded it neatly, and threw it in the trash. For 2 years, I had paid for all their meals and household supplies. I walked to my computer and logged into my personal bank account. With 3 simple clicks, I removed Mark and Chloe as authorized users from my credit card. I then transferred my savings into a secure, separate account under my name only. Mark and Chloe both had stable jobs, but they spent recklessly on luxury items. They relied on my wallet to fund their daily living expenses without any guilt. At noon, I drove to the local supermarket and bought groceries for myself only. When I returned, I placed my food on one shelf of the fridge and put my specialty teas in a small lockbox. Later that evening, Chloe walked into the kitchen, looking for her favorite organic snacks. She opened the pantry, sighed loudly, and turned to glare at me with annoyance. "Clara, you forgot to go shopping," she said, tapping her foot on the floor. "I bought my groceries," I replied calmly, sipping my tea without breaking eye contact. "But what about our food?" Mark asked, stepping into the room looking very confused. "You are both adults," I said evenly. "You will need to buy your own food from now on." Chloe scoffed, clearly thinking this was just a petty phase I would soon outgrow. She pulled out the credit card to order food, unaware of its new status. I watched in silence as she dialed the local restaurant to place her order. The real shock would hit her when that card was declined. I finished my tea, waiting patiently. The shift had started, truly. The declined transaction sent Chloe into a quiet, simmering rage that filled the kitchen. She stormed into the living room, waving the plastic card in the open air. "The bank made an error," she demanded, expecting me to fix the sudden problem. "There is no error," I stated plainly, turning the pages of my reading book. I removed you and Mark as authorized users because I am no longer funding your daily lifestyle. Mark rubbed the back of his neck, looking completely overwhelmed by the direct confrontation. Mom, you cannot just cut us off without warning, he muttered very weakly. I gave you free rent for 2 years. I reminded him with steady composure. Your finances are now your responsibility. I did not raise my voice, and I did not engage in further arguments. I simply set a firm boundary that they could not easily step over anymore. The next morning, I took my actions a step further by changing the internet. I paid the bill, so I reset the Wi-Fi router with a new password. When Chloe tried to stream her morning workout video, the screen remained totally blank. She marched upstairs, knocking aggressively on my bedroom door while I dressed for outside. The internet is down, she announced, crossing her arms with a deep, frustrated scowl. It works perfectly fine for me, I answered, stepping out into the bright hallway. If you need internet access, you should set up your own personal utility account. The realization slowly washed over her face as my practical words finally sank in. She could no longer control the resources in a house she did not own. She had tried to push me into the basement, treating me like discarded furniture. Now, she was learning the heavy cost of biting the hand that fed her. I walked past her, grabbing my car keys from the small wooden hall table. Today, I had a meeting with a property manager and an attorney. I wanted every next step to be clean, legal, and impossible for Chloe to twist. I smiled. Over the next few days, the house descended into a quiet chaos as my new rules took effect. Without my daily cleaning routines, the living spaces began to look messy and unkempt. I only washed my own dishes, leaving their dirty plates piled in the sink. I only washed my own laundry, letting their clothes overflow from the bathroom hampers. Chloe was furious, but she refused to pick up a sponge or a broom. She genuinely believed I would eventually cave under the pressure of a dirty house. She underestimated my ability to completely ignore things that were no longer my problem. I spent my afternoons away from the house, enjoying long walks in the park. I drank coffee at local cafes, reviewing my financial documents with a clear mind. During one of those outings, I found a quiet apartment with enough space for the pieces I loved most. I signed the lease that afternoon, paid the deposit and first 2 months, and told no one. When I returned home that evening, Mark was standing awkwardly in the cluttered kitchen. "Mom, this place is a total disaster," he complained, gesturing to the overflowing trash. "Then you should take out the garbage." "Mark," I replied, walking past him easily. "Chloe is stressed," he continued, following me closely into the dimly lit living room. "She says she cannot live like this anymore, and she needs her own space." "I completely understand," I said, offering a polite but distant smile to my son. Space is very important for a married couple. I walked into my bedroom and closed the door firmly behind my tired back. They wanted space, and I was going to give them exactly what they requested. I pulled out my phone and dialed the number for a professional moving company. The schedule was perfectly set. Everything was falling into place. Moving day neared us. Thursday morning arrived with a tense silence that hung heavily in the dining room. Chloe slammed her coffee cup on the table, her patience finally reaching its limit. "We need to talk," she announced, staring at me with cold, uncompromising, dark eyes. I placed my newspaper down and gave her my full, undivided, personal attention quietly. "Mark and I have decided that this living arrangement is simply not working anymore." She spoke as if she were the rightful owner dismissing a bothersome temporary tenant. "You need to pack your things and find a retirement community," she stated bluntly. Mark looked down at his shoes, unable to meet my gaze during her speech. "We need the whole house to ourselves," she continued, crossing her arms with pride. "This is our time now." Clara, and you are holding us back from growing. I felt a brief pang of sadness for Mark, but it vanished very quickly. I did not cry, and I certainly did not argue with her ridiculous demands. I understand, I replied softly, my voice perfectly steady and completely devoid of anger. I will start packing my things immediately, just as you have asked me to. Chloe looked surprised by my quick surrender, but a triumphant smirk replaced her shock. Good, she said, standing up and smoothing the wrinkles on her expensive work skirt. We expect you to be out by the end of the upcoming weekend. Clara. They both left for work, leaving me alone in the house to begin packing. What Chloe did not realize was the exact definition of the phrase, my things. She assumed I would take my clothes, my old photos, and my jewelry boxes. She forgot that I bought the leather sofa she loved to lounge on daily. She forgot that I purchased the modern dining table and the expensive kitchen appliances. I picked up my phone and sent a quick text message to the movers. They were ready. I was ready. Game on. Friday morning. I woke up early and drank my coffee in complete, peaceful silence. Mark and Chloe had already left for their respective offices, eager for the weekend. Precisely at 9 o'clock, a large moving truck backed into the concrete front driveway. 4 movers stepped out with blankets, tape, and boxes. I handed the foreman a detailed checklist of every single item I owned legally. Everything on this list goes into the truck. I instructed him with clear authority. They worked efficiently, starting with the expensive leather sofa in the main living room. Next went the custom armchairs, the wooden coffee table, and the large television set. The room that once looked like a magazine cover was quickly stripped entirely bare. In the kitchen, they packed the microwave, the toaster oven, and the espresso machine. They even took the dining table and all 6 matching chairs from the corner. I packed my favorite plates, the silverware, and every single pot and cooking pan. I left them exactly what they had brought into my home, absolutely nothing valuable. By early afternoon, the house echoed with the hollow sound of totally empty rooms. I walked through the bare hallways, feeling a sudden wave of immense, profound relief. I was not acting out of petty revenge. I was simply claiming what belonged. I was taking back my life, my possessions, and my own hard-earned peace today. The movers finished loading the truck and drove away toward my new apartment building. I stood in the empty living room, holding the keys to my own house. I took dated photos of every room and placed a formal notice from my attorney on the kitchen counter. The notice gave Mark and Chloe until the end of the month to leave peacefully. Their keys would still work until that date, because I wanted this done legally, not emotionally. I stepped outside and closed the front door behind me. Feeling lighter than ever before, the boundary was set. For the first time in years, the silence felt like mine. I arrived at my new apartment and spent the afternoon directing the busy movers. My familiar furniture fit perfectly into the bright, modern rooms of my new home. The leather sofa looked even better against the fresh, clean walls of the living room. I unpacked my favorite tea sets and arranged my books neatly on the shelves. For the first time in years, I felt entirely in control of my environment. Meanwhile, the clock ticked closer to 5, the time Mark and Chloe usually returned. I imagined their car pulling into the driveway, completely unaware of the dramatic change. I imagined Chloe unlocking the door, expecting to find me packing a small suitcase. Instead, she would find a house stripped of its warmth, comfort, and basic utility. At exactly 5:30, my phone began to buzz on the kitchen counter. Mark called first. I let it go to voicemail. 5 minutes later, Chloe called. This time, I answered and put the phone on speaker. Clara, what is going on? Chloe shrieked, her voice echoing sharply through the speaker. Where is all the furniture? Where is the television? Did we get robbed today? I took a slow sip of my tea, savoring the warm, soothing chamomile flavor. No one robbed the house. Chloe, I replied in a calm, steady, quiet tone. You told me to pack my things, so I packed exactly what belonged to me. The sofa, the television, the dining table, she stammered, her panic growing with every word. Everything I bought with my money, I confirmed, setting the teacup on the table. I left you your clothes and the empty walls, just as we silently agreed. I could hear Mark shouting anxiously in the background, demanding to know the truth. The reality was sinking. They knew. You cannot just empty the house like this, Chloe yelled into the phone angrily. We have nothing to sit on. We do not even have a dining table anymore. You wanted the house to yourselves, I reminded her, keeping my voice completely even. I simply removed my personal property to respect your boundaries and give you space. Mom, please, Mark interrupted, taking the phone from his wife in a pure panic. We cannot live in an empty house. How are we supposed to cook dinner? You will figure it out, I told my son, feeling a quiet, solid resolve. You are adults with salaries. You can buy your own furniture and cooking pots. Wait. The notice, Mark said suddenly, his voice trembling as he realized another issue. There is a legal notice on the kitchen counter. It says we have until the end of the month. That is correct, I explained matter-of-factly, adjusting a picture frame on my wall. Your keys will work until that date. After you leave, the locks will be changed, and the property will be turned over to the new tenants. That is why I documented the condition of every room before renting it. Renting it! Chloe screamed in the background, her voice cracking with absolute, undeniable shock. You are renting out our house, she demanded, grabbing the phone back from my son. I am renting out my house, I corrected her firmly, emphasizing the crucial, factual pronoun. The deed is in my name. You cannot throw us out overnight, Chloe shrieked, grasping at whatever control she thought she had. I am not throwing you out overnight, I said calmly, looking out my beautiful apartment window. You have written notice, time to find a place, and a clear deadline. That is more respect than you offered me. Enjoy your empty rooms, I finished, pressing the red button to end the call. I turned off my phone entirely and walked into my perfectly arranged new kitchen. They had underestimated me from the very beginning. I did not need revenge. I only needed to stop giving them access to what was mine. The weekend passed quietly without any more frantic phone calls from my son. I spent my time exploring my new neighborhood and discovering a lovely bakery. I bought fresh croissants and enjoyed them on my balcony in the sunshine. On Monday morning, Mark showed up at my apartment building unannounced and tired. I saw him through the lobby glass and went down to meet him. He looked exhausted, wearing a wrinkled shirt and carrying a small cardboard box. Mom, he said softly, his eyes filled with a deep, humbling, personal regret. We slept on the bare floor for 3 nights. It was absolutely miserable. Actions have practical consequences. Mark, I replied, crossing my arms over my chest. Chloe is furious, but she finally understands that she does not own everything. She wants to apologize, but she is too proud to say it directly, Mark said. Her pride is not my problem, I stated simply, without any lingering anger. I am renting out the house to a nice family starting next month. Mark nodded slowly, accepting the firm reality of his new independent living situation. We found a small apartment. he admitted, looking at the ground with shame. It is nothing like the house. But we can actually afford the rent. That is a good first step, I told him, offering a genuine nod. You both need to learn how to manage your own lives and finances. He handed me the cardboard box, which contained a few items I missed. I brought your gardening tools, he said quietly, hoping for a small connection. Thank you, I said, taking the box and stepping back toward the door. I will call you in a few weeks when we are entirely settled. Take your time, I answered peacefully, watching him walk back to his car. The separation was necessary for Mark to finally stand on his own. I returned to my peaceful space, holding the small box of gardening tools. A fresh start awaited. Today, 6 months have passed since the day I packed my belongings and left. The rental income from my old house easily covers my modern apartment expenses. I have joined a local book club and started painting in my kitchen. My days are completely my own, filled with simple joys and quiet peace. Mark calls me every Sunday afternoon to talk about his regular work week. He and Chloe are still together, living in a modest, 2-bedroom apartment nearby. They have learned to budget their money out of absolute, unavoidable, daily necessity. Chloe no longer buys expensive designer clothes or orders out for every meal. We had dinner together last month at a small, affordable, local Italian restaurant. Chloe was polite, keeping her opinions to herself and treating me with respect. The underlying tension was gone, replaced by a clear, unbreakable set of boundaries. She knows exactly where she stands, and she knows I will not yield. I do not harbor any resentment, but I also do not offer favors. I am no longer the passive woman sitting quietly in my own home. I am a mother who forced her children to face the real world. Taking control of my finances and my property was the best decision ever. I did not need to scream, cry, or engage in long, dramatic arguments. I simply asserted my actual ownership and let reality do the heavy lifting. The keys to my happiness were quite literally the keys to my house. As I water my plants this morning, I look around my beautiful living room. Everything in this space belongs to me, earned through decades of hard work. Empty houses tell no lies, but a well-loved home tells a beautiful truth. I smile, sip my tea, and open a new book. For the first time in years, the quiet around me does not feel lonely. It feels like home.